This video is a compilation of reviews I was planning on releasing separately, but after thinking it through, it makes more sense to have them all together, since they're reviews for movies that have one thing in common. They are all nominated for Best Picture in this year's Oscars. Not sure if I'll do this for other years, so don't get used to it. Anyway, let's go. So I just saw The Power of the Dog, the most nominated movie and likely winner of Best Picture in the upcoming Oscars. And it was boring. It was very, very boring. This film stars Benedict Cucumber, the guy from Breaking Bad Season 5, the original MJ, and this kid whose main characteristic is that he looks weird. Besides them, we also have cameos from actors who have all been in more interesting shows than this. Agent Lundy from Dexter, Barney's mother from How I Met Your Mother,
A whore, dear. A dirty whore.
and Tullius from Spartacus Gods of the Arena. I'm pretty sure that was him playing the doctor by the end of the film. The Power of the Dog is a difficult movie to describe with few words. It's a western drama, a period piece. It involves around two brothers and a mother and her son. One of the brothers gets involved with the mother and they get married, while the other one is not very happy with this arrangement. It does not like MJ or her son. I'll be honest with myself, this movie was a slog to go through. I saw it once in January, but turned it off after 10 minutes. It was excessively boring. I decided to give it a second chance, because why not? And also, I'm trying to see if I can review all the Best Picture nominees before the winners are announced. I'll probably fail, but fuck it, let's give it a go. So, Sherlock Holmes is a cowboy in this movie, a ranger. He's also the protagonist, although the plot focuses more on the other main characters and their reactions to what Cucumber does for the majority of the film. It wasn't until the movie got to around 1 hour and 30 minutes that I understood why this might be important to the Oscars, because that's when we get a scene that pretty much implies that Phil, Cucumber's character, is gay. He watches his boys taking a bath in the river and splashing water at each other, and immediately goes to a place in the woods by himself and starts masturbating. The editing even has MJ's kid finding Phil's stash of definitely not gay porno magazines at the same time. That was the moment when I had an epiphany and understood why this movie was nominated for so many awards. Because, I'll be honest, in terms of substance, this movie is very weak. There's not a lot of story, and the characters, besides maybe Phil himself, are not that interesting to watch. And Phil is only slightly more compelling because he acts like a dick for the whole movie. He always needs to show off and be the man in whatever scene he's in. That's why he was somewhat fun. But I'll give credit where credit is due. This movie is clever. It uses visual storytelling perfectly. Pity the story it's trying to tell is so weak. In the beginning, we see MJ and her son, but we don't see a husband. They don't use cheap dialogue to communicate that he's missing or dead. Instead, they have a moment where the son goes to lay paper flowers on his grave. That moment made me smile. It may be a small scene for most people, but to me it tells me the people who worked on the movie knew what they were doing. Later on, near the end, there was another moment, but with this one, I'm not sure how to feel. It was still visual storytelling, but this time it felt unnecessary. I'm talking about when Phil died. The movie ends with him dying of anthrax, and the sequence of events goes something like this. Phil mentions there's a dead animal along the path they take around the ranch, and he died of anthrax. Phil is an asshole towards MJ and her son, until he starts bonding with the son. On one of their bonding trips, Phil cuts himself and ends up with a big wound on his right hand. Then the son, who wants to be a doctor, goes and performs some sort of operation on a dead animal. He removes the animal's hide. MJ gives all of Phil's hides to some random Native Americans. Phil freaks out, but then the son offers him the hide of the dead animal he skinned. Not knowing where that hide comes from, Phil accepts it. This is a sequence of events, but it's not until Phil's brother talks with the doctor that we can put the pieces together. The doctor, played by Tullius from Spartacus Gods of the Arena, fantastic show by the way, he tells him that he thinks Phil died of anthrax. Just from this conversation, it's possible for the audience to infer how Phil died. The kid kills him. However, the film still ends with a scene that pretty much spells out everything to the audience. This felt unnecessary. The only new piece of information we get is that the kid is keeping the rope with anthrax under his bed, in case he needs to murder someone else, I guess. Other than that, it felt like the movie didn't trust the audience to be smart enough and realize what happened for themselves. There's not a lot more I can say about the film, it's not that memorable. The performances were fine, but the only one who should have been nominated for an Oscar is Doctor Strange. The other actors did a good job, but they were never impressive in a way an Oscar-nominated actor should be. Hell, there are Marvel movies with acting that's just as good as most of the acting here, but those movies aren't meant to be taken seriously, unless it's about black people. And even then, the movie might be nominated, but the actors get nothing. This movie reeks of Oscar bait. Besides being a period piece, something the Oscars love to jump on, it's all about the actors. There's very little dialogue and a lot of scenes of just the actors doing their thing, the thing their characters are feeling at that particular moment. My problem with this is that those characters aren't interesting to watch. I don't care about MJ drinking. I don't care about Phil being gay. I don't care about the son being a murderer. Although that was by far the most exciting thing that happened in the whole film. I don't care. That's the issue. The movie didn't make me care about anything that happened in it. I'm giving The Power of the Dog a 6 out of 10. It's well put together with nice performances and one standout, but the story and the characters are just not that good. I'm sorry. The most exciting thing for me was the visual storytelling. The story itself was pretty dull. I don't want this to win Best Picture, but I'm most likely going to be disappointed. Next on my list is Don't Look Up, and it was fucking obnoxious. That's the best way to describe this thing. Just like The Power of the Dog, I also saw the first few minutes of this movie back in January. But unlike that film, where you could at least tell it had some talent behind it and it was intelligently well made, this movie looked and sounded terrible, so I turned it off. I wasn't going to waste my time with trash, like I'm doing right now. I carried on with my life, and every time I read something about the movie online, it was baffling because this movie I found to be terrible was being praised on websites like 9gag and Reddit like it was some sort of modern masterpiece. And it's beyond embarrassing that this is actually nominated for Best Picture. The Academy doesn't give a shit anymore. They want to be a joke. Don't Look Up is a terrible movie about a comet hitting the Earth in 6 months. However, unlike most disaster films with similar premises, the gimmick of this movie is the tone. Very few characters take the premise seriously. The politicians are more concerned with upcoming elections or scandals that are breaking on the news, and the media doesn't take them seriously until the government starts acknowledging the issue. And even then, it's all a big joke. That's the whole premise and uniqueness of this film. It's a satire on how modern society would react to this apocalyptic event. The problem is that it gets old pretty quickly. This is a 2-hour long movie with material that's only good enough for 60 minutes, if even that. The story doesn't get better just because we have famous actors saying the F word or that they need to get high. That's not what makes this type of movies work. The same way it's so entertaining watching the government joining hands with some billionaire and decide that they're going to try and make money by mining the comet. It's obvious that people can and will take advantage out of any dire situation, but making a movie about how that's the whole point, people suck, without saying anything else, it doesn't make for a good movie. Arrival did a better job at portraying how society would realistically react to the appearance of aliens than this film does for a comet hitting the Earth in 6 months. You know why? Because it's subtle. This movie is like telling a joke that was funny one time and then keep on telling that same joke because you don't have anything else. And the movie is pretty insulting towards a specific audience. After the halfway point, there are two movements that arise within the story. The people who say just look up because you can see the comet coming towards Earth, and the people who deny the existence of the comet saying don't look up, with most of their audiences wearing red hats just like Trump supporters used to. It's weird because on social media, this movie was being praised for telling things like they are and sticking it to politicians and billionaires for being greedy and self-centric. It's like, don't you people know when someone is making fun of you? I'm not defending Trump supporters, just pointing out that this movie isn't just making fun of politicians, the media, and multimillionaires. This movie was painful to go through. The only highlights of this god-awful comedy were two actors that did a fantastic job. Leonardo DiCaprio and Mike Rylance were amazing. Their performances were even better than some of the actual nominees. It's kind of funny when you think about it. If I would have nominated this movie for anything, it would have been Best Actor for Leo and Best Supporting Actor for Rylance. The other actors were fine, but nothing special. I'm giving Don't Look Up a 3 out of 10. I hated every single second of it. It's an obnoxious, irritating excuse for a film that thinks it's funny when it's not. If this actually wins Best Picture, it's proof that the world is going to win in 2022. Scrolling through Wikipedia, I read that the impact event is supposed to be an allegory for climate change, or so they claim. That doesn't make the movie better, it makes it worse actually. Climate change and a big rock in space coming towards the planet Earth to kill everybody are two very different situations. The mere notion that you could use one to address the other is laughable. Humans are creatures with short attention spans. If there was a comet coming towards us, people would pay more attention because it would actually affect them directly and not just future generations. Maybe I needed to be American to enjoy this movie. Maybe that's the problem. Next on my list is Nightmare Alley, another movie that has no place among the best movies of the year. But the Oscars are like that. They seem to enjoy nominating mediocre, bland pieces of nothingness. I'm gonna try and keep this short. There's not a lot to say about this film. I didn't even know of its existence until I started this project. Not a lot of people did, by the looks of it. It's directed by Guillermo del Toro, the guy behind one of the best movies ever made, Pan's Labyrinth, and a lot of other great movies, or at the very least, entertaining movies. Unlike those, Nightmare Alley seems like an experimental film to see how boring cinema can be. It's impressive how slow and tedious this is. It's hard to describe the premise because there's almost nothing here. It starts off with the protagonist dumping a body in a house and using CGI fire to destroy everything. Then he takes a train and arrives at a carnival fair. The first half of the movie is him living with the people who work in the fair. He gets a job there because he's the main character. There isn't a clear goal on what's happening. It's almost like a slice of life, in a really bad way. You don't understand why he decided to get a job there, and it's not clear why everyone that works in the fair opens up to him. He gets a free hand job while taking a bath, and in another scene, he gets a free dinner and learns about how kidnapping drunks out of bars and getting them addicted to drugs is the trick to getting a geek. A geek is a beast man that eats chickens and somehow this entertains people. The movie takes place in America during World War II, so it's somewhat understandable that something like this might keep the masses entertained. It all comes across as bizarre, since none of the characters know him that well. The story didn't do a good enough job developing the relationship between the main characters, or any characters. Later on, there was a moment where it seemed like something interesting was finally going to happen. The protagonist started reading a notebook on how to read people and talk to the dead, but the owner of the book woke up, interrupted him, and told him about the dangers of reading it. You might start believing that you have real power and get over your head. Unfortunately, there is no supernatural aspect to this film. The protagonist manages to read people, but it's more of a Sherlock Holmes type of thing. This protagonist is just really good at bullshitting his way out of situations. I don't know what else to say. In terms of story, every foreshadowing is as subtle as the construction workers outside my house. Hellboy, there's a character that's played by the same actor who did the Hellboy movies. Hellboy tells our protagonist that if he hurts Rooney Mara, he's gonna get punched, and when Hellboy catches them making out, he punches him. Who could have seen that coming? The third act was exactly the same thing. After the protagonist fails to con a very wealthy man, he loses everything and becomes homeless. At that point, I was just waiting for when the plot was going to circle back to the fair and have him be the new geek. And what do you know? That's exactly what happens. Such thrilling storytelling. This movie sucks. The costumes and sets look amazing, I guess there's that. Everything else was either just okay or a complete waste of time. I don't understand why this was nominated for Best Picture. Even with a film that I don't think is that great, like The Power of the Dog, I sort of get why people might like it, but this thing, there's nothing here. For over 2 hours you're watching a crappy melodrama about people doing bad things in the slowest possible way. The film drags, unlike this review. I'm giving Nightmare Alley a 4 out of 10. It's closer to a 5 than a 3. The only nominations that it truly deserves are for costume and production design. The cinematography is fine, but nothing impressive, and the direction is all over the place. It's the director's job to make sure every aspect of the movie comes together in the end. If there are problems, the director is also to blame. So when the plot is less compelling than a TikTok video, then the director fucked up. Next on my list is Spielberg's West Side Story, which besides Dune, it was the most entertaining movie out of the ones I've reviewed so far. I actually really like this movie, right until the ending. We're gonna talk about that ending in a minute. I know this is a remake, but I'm not familiar with the movie from 1961. I don't think I've seen it. Musicals aren't really my thing. The only one I have a certain fondness for is Singing in the Rain. That movie is fantastic and puts a smile on my face from beginning to end. West Side Story is about racism and romance, two things Americans seem to love. It's set in 1957. We have on one side white boys and on the other side slightly more brownish Puerto Rican boys. Sometimes it gets confusing to know which is which, since some of them don't look that different from each other. So let's just say that we have Spanish speaking people on one side and English speaking people on the other. It's easier to distinguish them this way. Obviously, the romance is between a Puerto Rican girl and a white boy, one of each culture to spice things up. Nowadays, that premise is hard to take seriously because of the Ukraine and Russia war that's happening at this very moment, and all the really fucked up jokes about people in Hollywood already planning to make a movie about how a Russian soldier falls in love with a Ukrainian civilian. It's too surreal. But the more the movie went on, the easier it was to get sucked into the story, which, by the way, even though I enjoyed it immensely, it wasn't anything groundbreaking. The movie was by the book. The main characters fall in love at first sight, there's conflict because their families don't want them to be together, the racism portion of the story picks up steam, and then there's the end. Everything is predictable and generic. It's a good thing the main actors have great chemistry with each other and are genuinely charming to watch. Their relationship could have used more development, but the actors did the best they could with the material at hand. Ansel Elgort does a better job in the first 5 minutes he's on screen than he did for the entirety of Baby Driver, and Rachel Zegler, the actress that plays Maria, was great as well. Although you have to forgive me if I'm not completely objective when it comes to her, I find her incredibly beautiful. Every time she was on screen, I just smiled. Now, speaking on the musical part of the movie, I enjoyed it. Not every time the characters randomly started singing, but for the most part, it wasn't unlikable. Although I wasn't impressed with anything. I haven't seen La La Land since it came out, but I remember being more impressed with the choreography and music in that film, even though I didn't find the story to be all that great. Similar to La La Land, the story in West Side Story also isn't great. I already said they should have developed the relationship between the two main characters more, but there were other parts that could have been improved upon. There was a character that showed up at random points throughout the film, and every time the plot focused on them, it completely destroyed the pacing. They just show up whenever the script needs something to happen or exposition to be delivered. It was an unnecessary character that should have been cut out of the story altogether or given an actual role to play instead of what I would describe as an extended cameo appearance. Now let's talk about that ending. Tony tries to stop the fighting but fails, and his best friend ends up dying alongside Bernardo, his girlfriend's brother. Tony kills him as revenge for his best friend. I didn't see that coming and got genuinely excited to see how they would handle Maria's reaction to all of this. It was terrible. After Tony confirms that he did indeed kill her brother and was planning to turn himself to the police, she still wants to fuck him. And they fuck. I mean, seriously? How horny is this girl? I know her brother was somewhat possessive about her life, but he wasn't abusive, or at least the film never portrayed him in such a way that his reaction from her is normal. It comes off like she didn't care about her brother and just really wanted that dick. If it wasn't for the ending, I would give this movie a higher rating. It honestly reminded me of the ending of Attack on Titan, something I'm still recovering from. I'm giving West Side Story a 5 out of 10. I was along for the ride until that terrible ending. Next on my list is Licorice Pizza, and this movie was pretty good. It's directed and written by Paul Thomas Anderson, someone whose movies are a mixed bag for me. I loved Phantom Thread and really liked Punch Drunk Love, but the rest of his filmography, I don't care about any of them. Even There Will Be Blood. It's a great movie, I just don't like it. It's possible to dislike a film and still find it to be of quality. Licorice Pizza is different. I've only watched it once, but I wouldn't say it's better than those films. It was more entertaining than There Will Be Blood, sure, but not as good. This film tells a coming-of-age story between a 15-year-old boy and a 25-year-old girl in San Fernando Valley, 1973. The age difference is a bit gross, especially when a great portion of their relationship is romantic, or at least as romantic as the first 4 seasons of Castle were before Kate and Castle finally got together. But the characters themselves acknowledge this problem. The 25-year-old girl, Alana, keeps the relationship as just a weird state of friendship for most of the story. She knows it's weird to be around a teenage boy, no matter how mature he is for his age. My favorite thing about this movie was the dialogue. It was intelligent and charming. When a character said something stupid, the other characters pointed that out. They didn't ignore it or started spotting meaningless lines of dialogue because it was in the script. This is the type of movie where you can tell a great deal of effort was put into making sure every scene felt authentic. The characters act like real human beings. It doesn't come off like fake Hollywood garbage. Take the most recent Batman movie, for example. There were at least 3 scenes where nothing about them felt earned, just generic dialogue and a mediocre delivery. Other than that, the movie has a great deal of story to tell. I would say too much. It definitely doesn't lack substance, but some of the sequences with famous actors like Sean Penn felt like they dragged the story more than helped it, but maybe I'll enjoy those moments when I watch this film for a second time. For now, I'm giving Licorice Pizza a 6 or 7 out of 10. Not sure. It's a 6, but I could change it to a 7 in the future. It's definitely not a 5. This film is well shot, has interesting characters that all have great chemistry with each other, the dialogue helps keeping you engaged in the plot, and it doesn't come off like a story you have already seen before. It's not paint by numbers. I wouldn't call it the best thing ever, obviously, otherwise my rating would be much higher, but it's far from being just average. I completely understand why this was nominated for Best Picture, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world if it won. although I doubt it will. My money is on The Power of the Dog. Next on my list is CODA, and this movie was good. This review is going to be very short. The title of the movie means Child of Deaf Adult. It refers to the protagonist, a high school girl. Apparently, this is an English remake of a French film from 2014. I haven't seen that one, so I won't be able to comment on which is better. But this movie was good. However, that's where it ends for me. It wasn't great, or amazing, or epic. It's a well-made, well-told, solid drama that most people can enjoy. This is also a coming-of-age story, like Licorice Pizza. However, this movie is most definitely paint by numbers. There isn't a single plot point that isn't easy to see coming. It's a formulaic story that anyone who has ever seen a movie before is familiar with. The struggles of a teenager growing up and becoming more independent from their family. The uniqueness of this film is that this girl's parents and brother are all deaf. The actors are played by actual deaf people as well. I even recognized the actress that plays the mother from 2 episodes of Law & Order SVU she did a guest appearance in, so that was pretty cool. The movie is well shot and well acted, it has some interesting characters, decent dialogue, although nothing impressive, and it honestly wasn't a bad experience to go through. The story is the weakest part. It's easy to predict when some sort of conflict is going to happen, or when characters are going to have sex, or when characters are going to bond with each other, and there wasn't anything special about the execution of those plot points either. It was just fine. I understand why this was nominated for Best Picture, the Academy needs good publicity, but I wouldn't call this one of the best films of 2021. It's good, but nothing special. I'm giving CODA a 6 out of 10. Next on my list is Belfast, and this movie was pretty good. This takes place in Ireland during the time of the Troubles. Check out Wikipedia for more detailed information on what the Troubles were. As for the context within this film, in areas where mostly Protestants lived, there were a few Catholic families, and some of the Protestants didn't like that. Wikipedia says it wasn't a religious conflict, and if that's true, then the movie did a poor job at portraying reality. Regardless, this isn't a documentary, so I don't care if they made things up. This movie was good. It's well shot, very well acted, the cast contains a lot of known names, the guy from 50 Shades of Grey, Judi Dench, and Caesar himself. Those were the ones I recognize. They all did a terrific job. Although none of them stood out, like let's say Heath Ledger in The Dark Knight, but there weren't any bad or mediocre performances. That's an achievement, considering the film has a few child actors. The black and white visuals didn't come off like some pretentious artsy gimmick just to please movie critics, it complemented the atmosphere the movie was going for. This takes place in the past, and the black and white helped getting immersed into this world. The story is told from the perspective of a Protestant family, and we see a little bit of all the family members' lives throughout this time period. The parents are wondering if they should move to another place, or at least send the kids to Australia so they don't get caught up with the violence and chaos that might happen. Poor guys, they don't seem to know about all the monsters that live in Australia. The son has his own little story, he's trying to get close to a classmate he has a crush on, and that whole plotline was very cute to watch unfold. The characters are all likable and feel authentic, none of them come off like cartoonish stereotypes or something of the sort. The weakest aspect is the story, it's not that deep. And also the stupid decisions that happen during the third act of the movie. The story never offers any type of moral ambiguity or anything too complex. It's very black and white, just like the visuals. Not a lot is open to interpretation. The family is just trying to remain safe while all this violence is happening around them. Nothing wrong with that, it's just that the movie never feels like a great piece of cinema. It's just good, and that's it. It never tries to be great. Now let's talk about the dumb story decisions that happen in the third act. The son and his cousin, I think she's his cousin, they join the people who are looting a random grocery store that probably belongs to some Catholic family, and when they return home and show the mother what they stole, washing powder by the way, the mother is furious, and instead of giving them a lesson inside the house, she takes her young child back to the store where people are still looting. This mother took 2 young children to a place of anarchy and violence. What the hell is wrong with her? I know what's wrong with her. The plot needed some conflict to happen, so they had one of the main characters make a very dumb decision that ended up with all 3 of them being taken hostage. It's contrived bullshit to make the plot move forward. And immediately after this, we have a very silly scene where the father manages to disarm the guy who is holding his family hostage by throwing a brick and somehow hitting the gun. This guy must be an ancestor of Hawkeye or something. This entire sequence was very poorly put together. The rest of the film was fine though. I really liked that dance scene, and there was a great moment of visual storytelling when the grandfather passed away. The rest of the film was much better than what I was expecting, considering the dumb decisions that took place before. I'm giving Belfast a 7 out of 10. It's closer to a 6 than an 8, but I think it will stay as just a 7. It's a good movie, but I don't feel the need to ever watch it again. Next on my list is Drive My Car, the first Japanese movie to be nominated for Best Picture. And all I want to say is this. Really? Really? This is the first Japanese movie you dumb cunts nominated for Best Picture? The movie that's 3 hours long and it's all about acting and theater? You people do know that cinema is about filmmaking and storytelling, not just acting and actors. Why nominate a movie that's actually fantastic, like Shoplifters, when you can nominate one of the most tedious and impressive 3-hour movies ever made? I know Shoplifters was nominated for Best Foreign Film when it came out, or whatever they are calling that category nowadays, but that wasn't enough. Shoplifters is one of the best films ever made. It should have been nominated for Best Picture instead of Roma. Roma can go fuck itself, and so can Drive My Car. I'm sorry, I can't be objective when the Oscars make decisions like this. This is only happening because of Parasite. But Parasite deserved it. It was actually engaging and entertaining to watch, besides being extremely well made. Drive My Car is none of those things. This is a 3-hour slugfest where they chose to film every time the main character went somewhere with his car, and it did not get better with each time. It was just the same thing over and over and over and over again. Repetition seems to be a theme within this movie. It's also extremely boring. Besides making sure all the unnecessary scenes about the car are included, the story itself is such an unspecial tale. The first half hour, the most interesting thing that happened was the protagonist finding out his wife was cheating on him. And then she dies very suddenly. Good way to ruin what could have been an interesting plot point. The rest of the film involves around the protagonist, who is a theater director / actor, doing rehearsals with his co-workers and bonding with his new driver. The company he works for doesn't want their artists to drive themselves, so they get him a personal driver. The two of them spend some considerable time together and start bonding. Unfortunately, it was impossible for me to enjoy any of that because of the way the film is made. Everything is so excruciatingly slow. It made the experience of watching this story so much worse. Thank God I watched this on my computer and the 10-second skip button exists. Without it, I would have turned this movie off after the first 30 minutes. I'm giving Drive My Car a 5 out of 10. It's a boring, overrated movie that's only nominated because the story revolves about acting and theater. If the subject matter was completely different, the Oscars wouldn't even notice this thing's existence. Next on my list is King Richard, a movie that was so generic, I don't even remember watching it. I know I gave it a 6 out of 10, so I must have enjoyed it. I remember Will Smith was great in it. It has been a while since he has been in a movie worth watching, and I also remember the story was about tennis. Other than that, nothing. It has been deleted from my brain. I guess forgettable is the right word to describe this movie. Whatever, I'm giving it a 6 out of 10. I might change it to a 5 later, but for now I'm gonna trust my first impression of the film. Next and last on my list is Dune, the first nominated movie I saw actually, although I never expected it to be nominated. It's sci-fi after all. I saw this back in October when it was first released in Portugal, and it was pretty damn good. I was actually kind of furious at this movie at first. Not because of the film itself, but because of the release date. Almost every other Western European country got to watch this in September, but my country gets fucked, as usual. I watched this in the theaters, but I wasn't planning to, for 2 reasons. I tried to read the book this is based on and gave up after a few days. It wasn't my type of writing. I was slightly curious about the story, but I did not care for the way it was written, so I dropped it. And the last Denis Villeneuve film, Blade Runner 2049, was a movie I had and still have a lot of problems with. I have even downgraded it from a 7 to a 6 out of 10. So I wasn't that excited to watch Dune in theaters. Nevertheless, fate intervened and this movie was leaked online a few days before it premiered. So I saw that version, enjoyed it, and decided to check out the movie in IMAX. My first IMAX movie experience. And it sucked. Not the movie, just the IMAX part. It didn't enhance my movie-going experience, and I never want to watch an IMAX movie ever again. Now let's talk about Dune. So far, this is the only 2021 movie that does what I love most about movies. It inspires me. One of the big reasons I love movies and series so much is because of the way they manage to capture my imagination. I love to get sucked into fictional worlds and imagine all the stories that could be created within them. It's an experience like no other. For that reason alone, Dune is my favorite movie from last year. But it's far from a perfect movie. Its greatest weakness is the story. This is an incomplete story, and it feels like one. And I'm not talking just about it being part 1 of 2 movies. I consider the first Lord of the Rings film, The Fellowship of the Rings, to also be an incomplete story, but it feels different from Dune because there's a lot more going on in that movie than in this one. Dune needed more story to properly flesh out its world and present its characters to the audience. I don't care if they needed to add an extra hour or two, if that's what it took to make it great. The movie has its stands, it works, for some people, but I don't think anyone will say it's perfect, the complete package. The best way I can describe Dune is that it feels very much like the first few episodes of a great science fiction television series, instead of feeling like a great standalone movie. A lot is riding on part 2. And even if part 2 is 5 hours long, filled with great action scenes, good character moments, and amazing storytelling, part 1 is still going to feel lackluster. It could have been so much more exciting and compelling. Other than the story, this movie is technically flawless, discounting a few aspects of the visual effects that could have been improved upon, and sometimes the choreography in the action scenes would look too weird. The costumes, sets, music, performances, everything was fantastic. This is a movie that rides or dies because of the story and the way it's told. The editing is perhaps its greatest aspect. It invokes so many different emotions and creates an amazing atmosphere of pure adventure and excitement. I love how this movie is put together. I just wish it had more stuff going on. I'm giving Dune a 7 out of 10. But the more I watch this movie, the more I seem to like it, so I might change this to an 8 in the future. I'll never give it a 9, the story is too lacking for me to give it such a high score, but being between a 7 and an 8 already makes it a great movie on its own. To end this video, this is how I rank all the Best Picture nominees. I'm pretty sure The Power of the Dog is going to win. If that doesn't win, then I have no idea which one will. Anyway, see you next time.